In this second series of videos, I am going to focus on how to make your data usable in some visualization programs. But before I get it started, I would encourage you to learn a little bit about Excel pivot tables. Now, pivot tables are one of the most powerful tool that you can use in data journalism and visualization, etc., because they allow you to explore your data at multiple levels. I am not going to cover pivot tables in any sort of detail. If you want to learn more about them, and it's important that you learn about them, you can go to my website, thefunctionalart.com, and then go to the tutorials resources section. And down here, if you scroll down, you will see other resources. One of them will be using Excel pivot tables, 6 videos on YouTube. There's plenty of resources on YouTube that will allow you to learn how to use pivot tables appropriately. But I'm going to illustrate that very quickly with just one very fast example. So this is the data set that we used on video, on the series of videos, on the first series of videos. If you remember, it's an exploration. It's a data set about school quality in Miami-Dade County. And we had all the schools, and then we have the board district, and we have the grade that each school received from the county, percent of the students who can read well, percent of the students who can do math well, and then the difference. Now, if you want to aggregate this data in multiple ways, you can either do it just by changing the order, the sorting order of this data, or you can use a pivot table. So in order to create a pivot table in Excel, and again, this is something that is explained in much more detail in the videos that are linked from my website, but that, by the way, I didn't create. If you want to create a pivot table, just need to place your cursor on any cell on your data set, and then you go to Data, Pivot Table, and this will create a pivot table on a new worksheet. I would recommend that you create it on a new worksheet. So you click on OK, and this is going to create a new sheet on your Excel file. Down here you can see that, a new sheet on your Excel file, and the pivot table is not populated yet. So again, I'm not going to explain this in any detail, but just be aware that a pivot table usually has several areas that you can populate. So let's suppose, for example, that you want to explore the data at the board district level. Remember that Miami-Dade is divided into several board districts. So I'm going to get board district, the board district variable, and I'm going to put it on the row area, and the board districts will be displayed over here. And now I am going to place, let's say, I'm going to explore, for example, the reading level, right? The percent of students who can read well. So I'm going to place reading level on values, okay? And what you will get is not any meaningful number. This is just a count of the number of values that are recorded. This means that basically on district number 1, there are 53 schools that reported the percent of students who can read well. Let me just zoom in just for a second, view, zoom, so you can see this clearly, 200%. There you go. So you have District 1, 53 records. So this is the number of schools that reported the percent of the students who can read well. But this is not particularly meaningful, right? What we may want to see is perhaps the average percentage, right, for each one of these board districts, right? So what we can do in the pivot table is to go over here, and instead of displaying the count of reading, we can click on this eye symbol over here on the right, and you will get this pop-up window, and instead of displaying counts, you can display the average or the maximum or the minimum value. So let's display just the average, and then what you will get is that on district number 1, 35% is the average number of students who can read well, versus district number 2 is 32 or 33, district number 3 is 63. All right, now we can add as many columns as we want to the pivot table. So for instance, let's suppose that you want also to display the math average. So I'm using the 2012 values. So I'm going to say math 2012. I'm going to drop it here. And again, this is the counts. What we are seeing is the count. I don't want the count. I want the average. So I'm going to click on the eye symbol here, and then I'm going to select average. And there you go. So for example, district number 1 has an average of 36% of the students who can read well, but it also has an average of almost 43% of the students who can do math at the appropriate level. Okay, and the average, the grand average of everything is around 50%. So a little bit more than 50% of the students can read well. A little bit more than 50% of the students in Miami-Dade can do math or could do math appropriately at the appropriate level in 2012. Now you can play with any of these areas over here by adding different filters. So for instance, we could create a report filter that will be displayed over here. So I'm going to get, for example, get a school grade and drop it on report filter. And what will happen is that this is going to create a filter that will let you see for all the schools, or let's suppose that you want to see only schools that get an average of A. So you open here, you unclick select all, and then you just click on A, and that will display among those schools that get a score or a grade of A from the county. On District 1, 53% of the students on average can read well, 67 or 68% of the students can read well. So this is the power of pivot tables, and there's much more to be learned on how to use them. So I would encourage you to watch the videos. I hope that this video has shown you that this is something worth pursuing or worth learning. So if you want to learn about them, just go to YouTube, look for how to use pivot tables, or just go to my website, to the tutorials, resources link down here, other resources, and then go to these videos about Excel pivot tables and learn from them, because they can be extremely useful. In the next video, I am going to talk a little bit about how to reshape data using a pivot table, which is a very, very important thing to do if you want to visualize your data properly.